Hello world. Give me a quick moment to get set up here. We're going to be taking a look at basically implementing an isometric game for the PSP web. This is kind of full circle. This is where I started building games, was with the PSP console, the web. However, the JavaScript implementation is extremely basic. So the PSP was released around 2004. And trust me, it shows. Okay, so we do have our avatar live system up. We're doing a horizontal stream tonight, so it's very unlikely that anyone will stumble across this, just due to the discoverability of these sorts of streams, and it's kind of niche. But that's good. That gives me an opportunity to kind of sit down and demonstrate everything. All right, making my way to the camera. Okay, so what you see right here on the screen took way longer to do than I thought was necessary. And it turns out this is for a couple of reasons. Before we get into this, let me just kind of explain what I've built here and what this channel is about in the first place. So I'm Will, the channel's called Codeloch, and I've been developing software, websites and apps for well over 20 years now. I started building websites for things like this when I was a kid, when I first moved to America, actually. The thing is in all those years that have passed, web browsers have continued to mature, and JavaScript has continued to mature as well. And we are spoiled by today's standards. But to be fair, even when this came out, the browser on here was known to be extremely limited. And I'm going to give you a breakdown on just how limited this browser is. All sorts of common things we take for granted today. Let's just start with the obvious, right? There is no let, there's no const, there's no arrow functions, there's no promises. It goes way beyond that. Way beyond that. We're talking ability to create elements dynamically is not possible. Should have been recording this actually. So let me go ahead and switch. All right, so we're recording on the camera as well. So just to reiterate what we have going on here, this is Kynto. It's an isometric avatar chat. And it's currently what you're seeing, if you're watching this on Kick or Twitch, you see as like a little cutout of this. These avatars can either come on from people coming on the apps or coming on the website. But one of the main ways people come on these days is for the YouTube live chat. Sometimes Twitch, sometimes the Discord channel, and we've had a couple of occasions where some people popped on from Kick. However, I kind of wanted to give myself a little challenge, and I think I was successful in that. I decided that I want to connect the YouTube live chat, Twitch, Discord and everything, the entire little avatar world that I've built to this PSP. So we're going to talk about some of the limitations of the browser that's in this thing. Starting off, this PSP right here has about 32 megabytes of RAM. I'm not sure which models came after it, had the 64 megabytes, but pretty sure this is bog basic. I'm not going to give you a breakdown on the specs of this device, but you're going to have to look it up yourself just to see that this thing is basic as far as what's available to it. But it can render HTML, it can render some CSS, and it does have JavaScript support. However, all the sort of technologies that we take for granted for manipulating and injecting new elements into a page do not exist in the PSP. And despite working on this system 20 years ago when I was learning how to code, building exactly games like this, actually some of the art is from back then, it reminded me that I had to do a lot of the element generation essentially on the back end. Now back then it was PHP, right? There was no nodejs. And that's fine. Today we're doing it with Node.js, and we're using EJS templates to basically generate all the necessary elements on the page. And what we're going to do is a little mini video series where I sit here and I implement as many features as I can into this very basic implementation of Kynto. So the end goals are a couple. One, we're going to have it so it can render rooms. So just like we have the full HTML5 support right here, there's gigantic rooms that we can navigate to.
Steam Deck joined Italia.
A user made map of Italy. Can't really zoom out. Probably a bad one. Let's go downtown.
Steam Deck joined Lock Lake.
So you get the idea. There's complex rooms because this is a world builder in a sense, a cozy little world builder. You can sit there and create rooms tile by tile. The thing is the avatar is mostly coming from the live chats. It's not like the old days where you just threw up a web game and people would find you in Google. It's not how the internet's set up today. And even though I've distributed apps for this in the native app stores, they don't get picked up. The one thing that's brought people on this system is YouTube live chat. Given the chat a piece of stream action, essentially, you get to be part of it both visually and audio and visually. So, what does that mean? You get text-to-speech system, it reads out your messages, everybody gets a unique voice. And then, of course, it renders an avatar on the world. Now, and even in the chat, there's commands to like make your avatar move about, pick items up, jump, dance, change clothing. We're going to go way more deeper into expanding input availability on the commands that are available, but we're definitely taking a little detour. And the detour is getting set up right here. So the end goal is here. Obviously, there's going to be no TTS built into the PSP. I don't even think we can play audio, but it does support Flash Player, a very light version of it. We might even explore that too, just to see what's available, if we can, if there's any socket support in the Flash Player that we can expose to the JavaScript. I highly doubt it, just because we can't even create an element. The property inner HTML that I would use in place of create element doesn't exist. You can fetch elements on the page, and you can adjust properties on the page. But as far as creating new elements dynamically, that's off the books. That's not happening. All right, give me a wee second to catch my breath here, and we'll continue on. Just a reminder to anyone that comes on here, you can interact with the live chat right now, and you'll actually be part of the stream. So the top right part of your screen you're seeing is the full HTML5 version of this game, powered by WebSockets, WebRTC, Canvas, WebGL, a whole bunch of different technologies. We're limited to what we can do on the PSP. We can basically make AJAX requests, hopefully. I remember we could. So we're going to confirm that works. Now, of course, we're not going to be transmitting JSON. So we're going to be converting our current APIs. We're going to put a middleware in front of it, essentially, to convert any API requests to XML. And then, even just because of the memory limitations of the PSP device, we're going to come back and essentially transform the room data to be a little bit more friendly for the PSP. But the end goal is to be able to render thousands of tiles, even if that means we're generating a tile image background in Node.js and then transmitting that. If we're going to be absolutely lazy, the easiest way to do this would be to render everything in Node.js and just essentially reload an image every couple of seconds, or every second, or how often we could do it on the PSP in the first place. one of the things I'm super concerned about with the chat bubbles is if we can't, there's no inner HTML property, how are we even going to update the elements that have been created on the page in the first place? So like I said, all the tiles, items, and avatars, we essentially have to create that on page load. The one way I did find around this, and what we could explore, is maybe implementing our own PSP game renderer for web, is making use of document.write. Most of you in web development probably haven't used document.write. And if you have, you're probably older, it's just as old as I am or older. Document.write essentially replaces all the content on the page with whatever you put in. But it does let you create new elements dynamically. The trade-off is, whenever you do that document.write, it destroys everything else on the page. So I'd essentially have to create like a shadow DOM, something similar to like how React or Vue handles it. When you put together a React or Vue component, the elements in that component do not match one-to-one to what's actually ending up in the DOM, the document object model, right? Like what the browser's actually rendering. React or Vue decides when and where and how to draw those elements, when to update them, etc. With the PSP, we're going to have to go all the way back and essentially start from the very scratch, from the very start. Maybe treat document.write as almost as like a game loop update. And I have questions how quickly the PSP is even going to be able to handle this. Say we're, even if we just limit the area around the avatar to like, a 5-tile radius, right? All around the avatar. There's still a substantial amount of elements that have to be created on the page. And they all have to have IDs, which contain like the tile location. So like this very top tile up here is 0, 0. And then we have 0, 1, 0, 2. And then over here we have 1, 0, 2, 0, etc., etc. So we're using the ID to store the tile location, so we can extract that later. And that's also useful because we have to essentially re-render all our stuff on page loads in the first place. But I think to make this the smoothest implementation here, I'm going to have to look at document.write. I don't want to go down the ActionScript route unless that gives us some ability to bridge some stuff into JavaScript, like I mentioned previously. The full version utilizes WebSockets and WebRTC. So that's how we have it. Like if I go into the stream room.
Steam Deck join stream new.
This is the room that's currently live on YouTube, Twitch, and Kick right now. So if any avatars were to pop up here right now, I would literally hear them on my Steam Deck and see them. So I should leave this up just in case, even though this format makes it very unlikely that anyone's going to watch it till after this recording's done, which is completely fine. I want to practice doing more long form videos anyway, and kind of more mini series targeting retro tech and retro web. And I think it's a great tool for people learning JavaScript or just anyone that finds this stuff interesting to kind of get a grasp on where things were and where we're at now. It's always a good time to be excited about web, and sometimes we need little reminders of just how powerful of like a app distribution platform it really is. And I'd say most sites have barely even scratched the surface of what's available in those browsers today. And we're going to use this as a conduit because it's going to be technically driven by the same data as this WebSocket driven world up here that has all the integrations to YouTube live chat, to Twitch, to Kick, some of which is used in polling to get the live chats like from YouTube, and essentially emulate a message event queue to tie it into my system. Works nicely. Twitch, Kick, a little bit nicer. Discord as well. Essentially, you can set up message receive handlers, essentially listening to events, which either is utilizing WebSockets or is doing something to act approximate to that. So very familiar with that. Brilliant. we have no chance of doing anything like that on this. We're lucky if we can get an AJAX request on this. To give you an idea just how limited it is, when one of the things when an avatar talks or a live chatter talks and it draws an avatar on screen and you see a chat bubble pop up, that's essentially creating a new, like a new div. It's putting content in it and it's positioning it on the page next to the avatar, right? We don't have that ability here because we cannot replace the contents of a div. So we might have to see if we can pre-render a couple of chat bubbles, maybe like 5, and they're empty iframes that we can just update the sources on. And then reload the iframe with the message and display that when appropriate. But we're going to figure out a way to make the illusion that this is connected to the live chats, because technically it will be. And once we're done, we'll pop it on a little camera and it'll be a regular mainstay display of the development live streams here. So really exciting stuff. One more wee break. All right. Now we're going to talk about what was just required to actually even get this to render on this page and some of the just had to stumble around. There's not a ton of documentation on what's supported on this as far as JavaScript, right? And even when trying to utilize AI to be like, hey, tell me which features are available, right? Is create element available? It doesn't know because that information is not widely available. So I'm essentially bumping around blind in a room and testing each of these features and then rolling them out, right? When I started, I thought it was going to be simple. All I need to do is render tiles in a room. We can create those elements dynamically. We can create our avatars dynamically. We can create our items dynamically. And kind of just follow the flow for how you would implement a game in the document object model, right? Nothing crazy. The first thing I found out, document.createElement not available, okay? All right, so I'm like, well, that's fine. I remember using, inner.html and just literally, creating my elements in a string, right? That way I'll get my new elements, my new tiles into my game div container and render them on the screen. Perfectly fine. Guess what property doesn't exist? .inner.html doesn't exist. All right, and I'm like, well, how else would I get my contents, like new elements on the page anywhere, anyhow? And I remember there's like, well, document.write. And it had been so long since I used that function. When I used it, it wiped my entire page. All right, I was hoping maybe at the very minimum it would just add elements to the end of the page, broken HTML, whatever, as long as it would render what I needed on the screen. That's what we're going for. We're not looking for a verification badge for a HTML implementation here. Essentially, document.write, only way you can get elements on the page. Problem with that is it's going to clear out everything else you have on your page. Everything. So we have to treat document.write as a render option. Essentially, if you look at it like in a game loop, and we are blitting images to the screen every cycle, every frame, we have to clear our screen, wipe it black, make it transparent, whatever, and then we start drawing our sprites to the screen again, right? That's one of the options we have with document.write is essentially creating our own shadow DOM and then rendering that using document.write however many times a second we can get away with it. Don't know how many yet. We still have to figure that out. The easiest way, the most annoying way, is to just server-side render those elements. Essentially, render all our tile divs first, render a cache maybe of 10 avatars that will be elements that will be recycled by the JavaScript control we do have on the page. Essentially see them as invisible or off screen. And if we have 3 avatars on, we'll pull 3 of those avatar elements out, set their X and Y location, their top and left, based on the isometric grid position. Okay, so if it was on tile 0, 0, we just feed in that and we get a result back and render it where we need to use an absolute positioning. Huh. And I did write some info, so we're just going to quickly run through it so it's easy to clip. All right, so this is the PSP web experience. It's built for the PSP browser, which is called NetFront, and apparently it supports HTML4. I don't believe that. Don't believe it. Don't believe it. Uses only basic JavaScript, so ES3 level features. And we're just talking about syntax. As far as which APIs are available to manipulate the DOM, it's anyone's guess. And maybe we'll use this as an opportunity to document some of that, maybe get it up in a GitHub README somewhere. Likely just pop this whole project up on GitHub when we're done, just as a little example of what we can still do in PSP. So obviously there's no WebSockets, right? But we are connecting it to a WebSocket-driven platform. And we're just doing that by standing up some additional Express endpoints, which we can, out the kitchen, dogs try to come in, which we can populate with XML instead of JSON, okay? So by doing that, hooking into my existing system here, we're going to be able to tap right into the YouTube, right into Twitch, right into Discord, right into Kick. So anyone that chats in any of those systems, it will run through everything as it typically does in the server. It moderates the message, it executes any required commands. And then what we'll do is we'll have the PSP ask for updates, maybe every 1 second or so from the server. And we'll have it respond to that. So hopefully, we'll be able to do very basic tweens, just updating the left and top inline styles for the avatars that are being absolutely positioned over the tiles. So we can make them tween about. So that basically gives us our avatar movement. And then we also need to render our chat messages, which will keep an eye on the battery. Juggling all this technology. Give us a second. Yep, so keep your eyes on this little project. I'll likely get back to my normal portrait streams on YouTube tomorrow where I sit here and develop this. And we'll talk about more of this as we get it built. I'm hoping that we'll be able to make an AJAX request, no problem, or XML HTTP request. It's been a while since Anyone's probably had to use that on modern day browsers. You get away with, fetch is built into the bloody browser now, and a lot of people are using Axe iOS, and they have the ability to, make use of packages and stuff. We're not doing any of that. We're doing everything raw from scratch. All right, and that'll do it for tonight, guys. Cheers for watching.